Good day. What we are going to be dealing with today is pretty much our first of our series of one-point perspective drawings. Now we're just going to start out today with a basic generic, as you're seeing right here, a basic school hallway with lockers, double doors, brick wall, tile floor, tile ceiling, so on and so forth. We're going to work basic today. This first lesson is going to be setup. Part 2 will be details. Okay, so what I'm going to try to do is I'm going to try to get you guys through this as painlessly as possible. So today we're going to deal mostly with establishing depth and distance, getting things smaller as they get away from us, and sometimes even closer together. Okay, so we're going to work on things getting smaller, less detailed, and things kind of appearing closer together as they get farther away from us. So you guys will be starting out with a sheet of paper that's 9 inches by 12 inches tall, 12 inches wide by 9 inches tall. Okay, so you know every drawing is not going to be this big. We're going to keep everything at a halfway point today, keep everything centered for the first couple drawings at least. So my paper is 9 inches tall, and I'm going to put my horizon line, remember that horizon line separates our ground from our sky. Even on an indoor drawing, we're going to consider that the same idea. So I'm going to go up halfway. Well, if 9 inches is my height, half of 9 is 4.5. Now before you just go measure and draw a line, measure once. Sometimes their lines get that way, especially as they draw, they push too hard with their pencil and they move their ruler. So I'm going to say I'm going to measure up 4.5 here. I'm going to go over here and measure up 4.5 and connect the dots. That way I know I'm 4.5 up the whole way. So I'm going to measure up from the bottom on my left side, 4.5. I'm going to slide this guy over, and I'm going to do the same thing closer to my right side. I'm going up 4.5. Now, something you may want to think about. With one-point perspective, we're going to have to get into the habit of erasing lines we don't need as we go, or we're going to have so many lines going so many ways, it's going to be very confusing. And the last thing you want when somebody views your artwork is to be confused. Okay, so I would keep, I talked about moving your hand up and down on the pencil for pressure. A lot of this stuff I'm going to be holding about halfway, because I will be erasing. There are some drawings we'll have the entire horizon line left. There are some drawings where we will erase 90% of it. So that's something to keep in mind. You guys know the harder you press, the darker the lead, the harder it is to erase. Okay, so we're up 4.5. Let's go ahead and put our vanishing point right in the center. So if mine is 12 inches wide, center would be 6. All right, so, and feel free to pause and rewind, whatever you need to do as we go along. All right, so we want to get our walls established, front and side walls, and kind of get everything set up. So placement of your ruler on this next step is very, very key. If your dots aren't where my dots are, your measurements are going to be way off. You're going to run into issues. So I'm going to slide my ruler all the way down to the bottom of my paper, and I'm going to literally put my dots on the bottom of my paper. So I'm going to make 2 dots. I'm going to make a dot at number 2 and a dot at number 10. Now if your dots are up here, your measurements are going to be off for mine. So that's something you want to keep in mind. These dots are at the very bottom of my paper. 2 and 10. And I'm going to slide up to the top of my paper, and I'm going to do the same thing at the top. 2 and 10. Okay. Now when we got a bunch of dots, we want to play connect the dots, but we want to send them all to our vanishing point. What I want you to stay away from is trying to connect top dot to bottom dot. If I do that right there, I'm going to miss my vanishing point. I think this side may even be even worse. Okay, so notice I'd be missing my vanishing point by about 1/8 of an inch, 1/16 of an inch or so. So I'm just going to treat them as separate. Each dot is its own line. So we're just literally kind of trying to create a large letter X going across our paper. So we've got this letter X across our paper. Now I'm going to take my number 2 dot at the top, and I'm going to send a line straight down with my ruler to the 2 at the bottom, and I'm going to connect 10 to 10. So this thing is going to kind of resemble an hourglass. It's laid on its side. If I took an hourglass and laid it on its side. So believe it or not, right now you've got 2 walls facing you. I've got a floor, a ceiling, and 2 walls going down the hallway. Okay, so what we're going to do first is we're going to set up lockers. We're going to kind of get a double door set up, kind of like the door you would be walking down Mr. Edwards Hall to go outside for lunch that kind of takes you out to that long jump pit. Most schools have double doors, whether they've got windows on them or not. Most of the time on a school, every entrance is going to have a double door. Okay, so as I told you before, things are going to get smaller and lines are going to get closer together as we get farther away. All right, so we're going to go ahead and set up our lockers. Now, when we go set these lockers up, that doesn't mean every single locker has to get smaller. You can go a couple at a time. You guys have been around long enough. You know what looks right. You know what doesn't. Okay, so this line right here, that one that goes from 2 to 2, I'm going to start my ruler there. Okay, that's where I'm going to start measuring. Now, if you did pretty good, your vanishing points should be somewhere around 4. Yours may be a little bit past it, a little bit before it, but somewhere around 4. Okay? So my first 2 lockers, and I'm going to write measurements on here. You don't have to do that. I'm doing that so you know it. My first 2 lockers are going to be 1 inch. So my first 2 notches are at 1 and 2. Okay? Next one, next couple, let's go 1/2 inch. So I'll go 2 1/2, 3. Well, what's half of a half? It's a 4th. So if you don't know where 3 1/4 is, start at 3 and count 4 notches to the right. 1, 2, 3, and 4. And let's do that twice. 1, 2, 3, 4. So your last one would be 3 1/2. So those are your measurements for your lines. Okay. Now, like I said, you can pause, rewind, what have you. In order to keep this going and not get mixed up, instead of measuring backwards and doing the same thing over here, I'm simply just going to spin my paper around and measure exactly how I did the last time. So I'll just start from the same line. 1, 2, 2 1/2, 3, 3 1/4, and 3 1/2. Okay? After you guys get that set up, you're going to draw these lines straight up and down, and they're going to go from X to X. Don't put any of your line up here, down here. That's floor and ceiling. Okay? Now, the biggest mistake I see my students make is their lines get crooked. So you need to work hard on getting the bottom of your ruler down here lined up perfectly with the bottom of your paper. You can see right there, mine's good. You tell right there with that little space, it's not. All right? So we want to make sure we're getting these dudes straight up and down. Going from top of the X to the bottom of the X. Now I'm going to go ahead and get rid of my measurements so I'm not trying to draw lines through them. All right. Okay, so right now, if you were to watch some old school show, like an old Batman show with sound waves, this feels like sound waves coming back at you. All right, so our lockers, notice we're not doing anything over here. Our lockers are getting smaller. Okay, we said we're going to establish that double door. So our last 2 locker lines here, we're going to connect them at top and bottom to make a nice little rectangle. Yours may not come out perfect. If it's really off, you need to go back and double check your measurements. A lot of times, that's where things go wrong. Okay, and as I've told you, we're going to get rid of lines we don't need. So going through my door, I don't need that X line. Okay. But they are double doors, so let's go ahead and cut them in half to 2 doors. Bada bing and a bada boom. There we go. Left and right. Okay, so now we've got lockers going down the hallway. Okay, getting a little smaller as we get farther away from us. Excuse me. Okay, so, what we're going to do first is we're just going to work on getting the details on the lockers. Okay, so, lockers have a number of things on them. Number one, how do I get into my locker? Well, I've got to pull my handle. How do I keep my neighbor out of my locker? Well, with a lock. How do I know which one is my locker? You got that little locker tag on the top with your locker number. And what lets all the stinkiness from your clothes and candy and leftover food? Well, those vents on the top and bottom. Okay, so those are 4 things, details that we're going to put on our lockers to sell the idea that they're lockers, okay? So, just like our lockers, we're going to start out with our handles. And these handles are going to get smaller as we go down the hallway, but we want to keep them with that magic word proportion. You know, I don't want a giant one here and a little one there. Yeah, it's getting smaller, but that would be, you know, if you're thinking value, that'd be like jumping from box 2 to box 7. Okay, we want to work step by step. All right, we want to keep them proportioned. So, you know, a lot of times if you're a little kid, my son's in kindergarten, and they're learning to write, and he comes home and he's got paper. Looks like this. Okay, so we know the middle. He knows where to make his letters. Okay, that'd be the, you know, that's your guide. All right, well, we're going to think about our horizon line is going to be, let's consider it that dotted line of our paper that we're learning to write on. I'll tell you what, I'll even make it look like a dotted line. I'll just erase some spots. Okay, so our horizon line on this right side is going to be our dotted line. So we're going to have to make one a top and a bottom, and this is going to keep everything in proportion. All right, so this can get a little tricky. So, you know, whether you're a sports person or not, you probably heard the word pivot. Pivot means I'm going to stay in this spot and just rotate on that spot all day long. So we're going to say our vanishing point's our pivot spot. All right, so I'm going to work right side first, and then we'll go and do left side. Got my pencil sitting on my vanishing points. I'm going to pivot. So I've got this guy lined up on my horizon line. I'm just going to rotate up a little bit and draw my top guideline like I would have here. Not very dark. You probably don't want to rotate too much. Go back to my horizon line, and I'm going to rotate down. So I've got a guideline now. Kind of looks like here, top, bottom, dotted line. Top, bottom, dotted line. Okay? So we'll go ahead, and I'll do that again on the left side, just in case. So we notice the pivot point, my pencil on that vanishing point. I've got it laid out with my horizon line. Let's just rotate up a little bit. Try to keep them pretty close. You know, I know it's hard to tell. Try your best to keep them pretty close in size. I mean, this one may be a little bit bigger, but that's all right. So I'm going to set mine up to look like a dotted line so there's no confusion. Now you guys know, you've been around long enough to know that if something looks right or not. Well, handles, doorknobs, all that kind of stuff, very rarely do you see a doorknob or a handle to something, to a door in the middle. You're going to see it left or right side because doors either open left or right. So I'm going to put my handles on the left side of my lockers and the right side. I don't care which way you put them. We're going to keep this simple. We're going to keep it basic. We're not doing anything fancy today. We're just going to make our right side, our handles, we'll just make them kind of look like a block letter C. And on the left side, we'll just flip that block letter C around. We're just going to keep it basic. We're going to keep it simple. We're not worried about fanciness today. Okay, so that's going to be the top. That's the bottom. As long as I stay in my guidelines like I would be if I was learning to write, everything will stay that magic word proportion. Now these guys, these may be just too big, but we're going to get through it. Okay, by the time you get to those last couple. Okay, so I got to flip my letter C around. Okay, so I kept mine. You'll notice nothing's in the middle. So once you get your handle set up, like I said, we got to get in the habit of getting rid of the lines we don't need. So I'm going to get rid of that dotted horizon and my top and bottom guidelines. Like I said, if we don't do that, 10 minutes from now, you're going to have so many lines, you're not going to know what goes where, and it's going to be very confusing. And like I've said before, the last thing you want to do is confuse people with your art. You want to know what it is and what they're looking at. Very simple. All right. Well, how do I keep my neighbors out? We got a handle. Now let's get that lock. Let's keep this basic. Let's keep this simple, nothing fancy. All right. So I'm going to have a loop and a couple circles. We want it to feel like it's going over the top. Okay. Just put you a circle on and color in that center the thing you'd be twisting around with all the numbers on it. Alright, now you don't have any guidelines for this, so you're going to have to work hard at keeping them pretty proportioned. Like I said, by the time you get to those last couple lockers, you know, it's going to be hard to tell what distinct they are anyway. So now we have some handles and some locks. So what we're going to do is we're just going to finish out with a couple details, and then we'll slide this into video too. Okay? So how do I know which one's my locker? Well, we got those little locker tags that have our numbers on them. Okay? So the top and the bottom of my locker tags, it's like drawing a little window. Okay? And the top and the bottom is going to come from the vanishing point. Remember I told you guys, when in doubt, send them to the vanishing point. Okay? So, I'm essentially making dash lines. I'm going to make 2 rows of them. And I'm going to start out kind of big. They're going to the vanishing point. And I'm going to get them a little smaller my whole way down. Okay? And I'm just going to roll under that, coming from the vanishing point. Remember the top and bottom. So they're parallel, and I'll connect them with 2 up and down lines. Just little dash marks, 2 rows of dash marks. The vanishing point. Making sure they're just getting shorter as we go down the hallway. And you can make yours B hall, A hall, C hall, whatever you want. By the time you get to the last couple, they're probably just going to be scribbles. And let's just finish this out with some vents. Vents are the same things. We'll just, if you want to put some top and bottom, it doesn't matter to me. Okay? Essentially just like we did here with our locker tags, but we're just going to do 3 rows of dash lines without connecting them. Coming from what? You guessed it, the vanishing point. Like I've told you, when in doubt, it's going to the vanishing point. Ooh, just kicking this dude everywhere. Okay, so I'm just going to set some up on the bottom. We may do top and bottom in class. So I did 3 rows of them. Okay, so I think when we get to class tomorrow, we'll probably do top and bottom, but I'm just going to leave it at bottom for time-wise. You guys can do the same thing for the top. Rows of 3 or rows of 2, doesn't matter. Okay? Good luck to you. I'll be ready for part 2.